Hi and welcome back for a Cottage Cuts YouTube video tutorial. Today I'm featuring this delightful card using the Spring Gnome Cottage that is part of the spring release available in the Scrap and Cottage. Here's a look at that die set. It does come with several different elements that would be perfect to use on their own. So there's the mushroom house you could certainly use by itself. There are some florals that you could add to other cards. And then of course we have the adorable gnome. I'm going to show you how I colored the beard. This is the only Copic coloring that I left in, but I always think it's worth showing. I have a C5 Copic marker and I'm doing a flicking motion with that C5, and then I'm going to blend in a little bit of C3. You'll notice I'm leaving white space in the middle. I'm going to flick in some C1, and then finally I'm going to finish off with a C0. There's a little disparity between the C5 and the C3, I believe, so I'm going to add a C4 marker, and then I'm going to repeat the same colors. So I'll go C3, C1, and then finally C0 will blend everything together. There is an embossed area on the beard for the mouth, so I'm going to use my C3 marker just to define that area, and once I get that defined, we're going to start building our gnome. I did build the mushroom house off camera, and then I'll finish with some of the accent pieces on camera, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to show you how I put the gnome together. Now, don't do it the way I did it because I started off wrong. I put the hat on, and then I realized that I need to tuck that nose underneath, so I'm going to remove the hat, and once I remove the hat, I'll place the nose in place, and then I'll put the hat back over that. You'll see the tunic right there. I'm going to add that, so I'll put some glue where the beard is, and I'm going to add that head to the tunic. You'll notice that I really did define some of those areas where the tunic was gathered with one of my darker markers. I did use some B markers for this. And I'm going to add the hands. Now here's where reverse tweezers are your friend. I'm just barely clipping on the edges of the wrists for this gnome, and those reverse tweezers are going to hold everything in place until that glue dries. So they're very helpful to have if you have a couple of pairs. If you do any die piercing or paper piecing or anything like that, I would recommend having the reverse tweezers because they're fabulous. It's like an extra pair of hands. I'm going to add my boots on. I do add the left one a little bit more to the right than what I liked, and so off camera I do move it more towards the left, but otherwise that gnome is in place, and we're going to start working on our background. I have a piece of 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch accent opaque white cardstock. I'm going to create a custom striped background. These stripes could be created on the diagonal, horizontally, but you don't need a stencil. So look around at the washi tape or at any of the painter's tape that you might have in your stash, and you can use those to help create a nice background that's going to coordinate with any of your coloring or die cut pieces. I'm using my grid mat to line everything up, and I probably should have started in the middle because the top and the bottom is going to be a little bit uneven. And even when I do bring in the die to cut it down, I don't quite get it perfect, but then again, I'm not a perfectionist. I'm going to start with some Catherine Pooler inks because they were the best combination that I could find to match with the colors that I chose for my gnome. And this is Party Dress. In between colors, I do use that baby wipe to wipe off the tape. So the tape that's above where I'm adding this tiara yellow, I wiped that off. I'm going to use some aquatini here. I have something borrowed, and then I'm going to add my Flirty Fiesta, and then I'll come back in with that party dress. Here's where the magic happens. I'm going to use that pad of paper just so I don't get any fingerprints on this ink, because it is still a little bit wet, and I'm going to remove that tape, and you can see just how vibrant and beautiful that background is. I'm going to use a rectangle die from my stash, and I'm going to cut this rectangle. Now I do have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch top folding card base. That rectangle did cut down that panel to 1/8 of an inch smaller than that, so I do have a little bit of a white border. I used 2 more of those rectangle dies to create this frame, and then I'm also going to use the center that cut out of the frame to house my gnome. So I added that party dress to my rectangle frame. I'm going to glue this to the center. It was hard for me to find the center. Now, I'm not a straight person to begin with as far as trying to glue things on, but the stripes just really was an optical illusion, and it was really hard for me to find the center. So I did the best that I could, and I'm going to add this white negative piece back in. Or is that the positive? That's the positive. I'm going to add that back into the negative, and now we're going to stamp our sentiment. I like to use a piece of acetate to make sure that I have my sentiment straight most of the time. And I'm using a sentiment from my stash and the Something Borrowed ink. I'll stamp it a couple of times to make sure that I get a really nice deep blue impression, and then we're going to add a little bit of color to the background. We are missing some of that purple. I have a couple purple flowers, but I wanted to add a little bit more of that flirty fuchsia, so I used what was left on my brush. The Catherine Pooler inks really a lot of ink comes off when you add your brush to it, so I wanted to make sure that I used what was left on my brush before I took it back to my ink pad. I've added some glue to the back of my gnome and my cottage, and I'm going to straighten this out because of course I never can get it straight the first time, but I'm going to get this straight, and then we're going to start adding some of our little elements. So we have these little flourishes. I'm going to add one to the left side and with the flower, and then I'm going to add one to the right side. Now, of course, because I have that mushroom house, it is a little bit uneven, which is why I'm using my reverse tweezers. I certainly could have added some foam tape, but surprise, I didn't add any foam tape to this. The Cottage cut dies do have a lot of dimension with the layers, and so I chose not to add that dimension in with any foam tape. I'm going to add these leaves to the left side, and then I'm going to add little bushes. I'm pretty much following what's on the packaging. So if you're ever wondering, how something needs to go, you can certainly always look at the packaging, and it will show you exactly where you can place those objects, or you can choose to place them where you want to. Once I finish adding my florals on the left and the right side, that is going to finish my card for today. I'm going to show you a close-up of the finished card. I hope you like it. I hope you'll give this background technique a try, and if you do, I would love for you to tag me so that I could see your project. Thanks so much for joining me today, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.